My name's John Clay. I joined Black Dyke Mills Band at the age of 14 and a half in 1958. And I served 15 years with the band. First of all, for the first 7 on Cornet, where I played all the cornet positions, including principal, and the final 8 years on Flugelhorn. I got a job at the age of 15 with the firm and became an apprentice overlooker and served 35 years with Foster's. I did come back to the band in 1990 as a General Secretary and served 2 years with the band as the General Secretary at that time. That was a very frightful time because David King was finished by David Allen, who was the manager and director of the company at the time, and the band went from a full complement down to 6 players when Jim Watson arrived. And eventually he built the band back up and after 18 months won the British Open again. And during that time I was the General Secretary, so my nerves were shot at that time, thinking the band would never come back up again. My memories of conductors goes back to Major Wilcox, and I can remember him coming into this band room and he would hand the score over to someone that was listening, a pondasher, and in the 60s there were arrangements of orchestral overtures. He'd researched the overture and the opera that the overture came from. He would tell the band the story of the opera and any solos that were in the overtures where the arias were in the opera. He would then go around all the band and correct their parts against the score and then take a two-hour rehearsal without a score. Now that to me is absolutely fantastic. Jack Emmett recorded each rehearsal and sent the major a tape, and he listened to it midweek and then either wrote or rang Jack up and giving him advice on what to do in the next rehearsals for him before he came up the final week, the weekends prior to the contest. And that to me is absolutely marvellous. He knew every man's first name, even myself, on the first rehearsal. We all called him Major. And a wonderful, wonderful man. He could command the respect of other men. Now that's hard to do in any form of work. You have to have that personality, that something that commands the respect, because the band here, when I joined, they were a hard-bitten lot. They called a spade, and if you didn't pull your weight, you were sacked, and you knew that. But when he walked into the band room, the respect that every man showed him was absolutely tremendous. It was a great pity that he collapsed and died in the January of '62. I have a lot of respect because the main story there is, of course, that about 3-4 weeks before we went to London, we did a concert in Wrexham, and Owen Bottomley on third cornet collapsed with a burst duodenal ulcer and was rushed to Wrexham General Hospital. And I was told I had to play the third cornet part at the finals because Owen was the only cornet player and he was ill. That I duly did, but 3 weeks before the contest, the week after, the major came up for a rehearsal on the Sunday. Took the Sunday rehearsal morning and then the afternoon rehearsal, and then Morris took him home to have a shower before he went back to Ford Motorworks in Dagenham. And on the way back from Bingley, a gentleman came out of a side road. Morris swerved to miss him, lost control and hit a lamp standard. The major went through the windscreen. Morris and Brian had concussion. I got back to the band room at 5 o'clock that night to go to over the top, Staley Bridge, I believe it was, where we had a concert. And I was told, you're taking Morris's place, playing a solo tonight. I said, well, I haven't rehearsed one. He said, it doesn't matter, you're still playing one. And that was my introduction to playing a solo with Black Dyke. The major was taken to Bradford Royal Infirmary and kept in for a week, so he was seriously ill. He went home to recuperate for a week and came back the final week to take the rehearsals. On the way down to London on the Friday morning, no motorway, it was all the A1. The coach duly set off with the supporters coach, and Peter Ainsworth, if you can get to see him, he was a second trombone player. He'd asked to take his mother and his aunt in his little baby Austin car. Jack Emmett said, yes, provided you follow the coach. Fine, no problems. Got outside Retford and they were resurfacing the road and they had the stop-go boards, not traffic lights. And the man said stop, and Walter Collins, the bus driver, stopped the coach, but Peter couldn't stop, the road was greasy. Ploughed straight into the boot of the bus. His mother had a broken arm, his aunt had lacerations, and Peter had concussion. They were all taken to Retford General Hospital. We prized the boot lid open, the doors open. Jeff Whittam's euphonium and Grenville's trombone was stoved in, and 2 E-flat basses. What they're going to do. So they rang Boozy and Hawkes up at Edgware, bring the coach direct to the factory. We drove the coach to the factory, got there at mid-afternoon, 2 o'clock-ish, and they gave us a tour around the factory, showing us how they made the instruments. Jeff said he wouldn't play any other instrument but that euphonium, so they repaired it, and the trombone. But they couldn't repair the 2 E-flat basses. So they said, here you are, take 2 off the production line and play them tomorrow. Now, you know, if you're playing a new instrument, whatever it is, I don't care what it is, television set or anything, you look at the instructions. And there's no instructions for brass playing. You've got to learn to play the instrument and find its idiosyncrasies and then put it in tune yourself. No time. Put the main tuning slide into tune and play it tomorrow. We then went to the Nella Hall to show the student bandmasters how we rehearsed for a band contest. The major was still not well, no second trombone player, the part having to be hurriedly rearranged for round the band to the baritones, etc., and the other trombone players. And it was not a very good rehearsal. But we got back to the hotel at 11 o'clock at night, and Peter had arrived. He discharged himself against the doctor's advice to go to London. I'll never forget that. We drew number 13 on the day, and we won. Fabulous. But we only saw the major once more because he came up to do a broadcast in the November, and then in the January of '62 he was rushed into hospital with heart attacks. I do have the very last letter that he wrote from his hospital bed to Jack Emmett, saying the doctors said that the accident had nothing to do with his condition. He was a heavy smoker, and I think it was the smoking that eventually caused him to have a heart attack. And he died on the 20th of January 1962. Very, very sad, but a marvellous, marvellous musician. I have a lot of respect and thinking back on that. The only other one that comes close for me is Geoffrey Brand. He's 90 now, and you will get this throughout all the players. We all still call him Mr. Brand. I can't help it. But what a gentleman, honestly. I said to you earlier, I was at the Albert Hall and bumped into him, and he shook hands and we spoke for 20 minutes, and people were walking past who thought there was something in the brass band world, and he said to them, I will be along shortly, I'll see you shortly, and kept talking to me and my wife for 20 minutes. And I'm just a lowly little cornet player of 40, 50 years ago, and I just love music, that's all. Those are my favourite memories. A funny memory is 1958, on my first trip to London. We had to go down on the Wednesday, and we gave 3 concerts at Vauxhall Motors for the lunch hour dinners, 3 half-hour concerts. Then in the evening we gave a concert in a local church. On the Thursday we went down to Calendar Cables, where Mr. William Foster was the managing director there, and gave 2 half-hour concerts for the work people and another concert Thursday evening. And then on Friday afternoon, Friday morning we motored into London, had an afternoon rehearsal with Major Wilcox, and then Friday night at 5 o'clock we had a bass band rehearsal from 5 till 10. And then we got up early at 6 o'clock on Saturday morning, went for a rehearsal with the Major, then did the contest, and immediately the contest was finished, we were on stage for the mass bands. And then we came off at 4:30, and at 5:30 we were back on for a 2-hour concert till 7:30. We finished that concert with half an hour, and at 8 o'clock we started the second concert, which went on till 10:30. I was 14 and I was literally falling asleep in the second concert. Eric, my friend on second cornet, he was like the second father to me. He was propping me up because I was falling asleep. But what I was going to say was, we got to one of the venues and Walter Collins was backing the coach up and Sam, the flugel player, come on Walter, come on, crunch, he hit the wall with the bus. I can see that happening now. So there are some funny anecdotes as well, but that's my memories, my early memories of the band. No, Kevin Wadsworth beat me. I was 14 and 5 months when I auditioned, and eventually, because it was the last rehearsal before the firm shut down and the band shut down for their August holidays, I didn't officially get into the band till September of '58, which made me 14 and a half. Kevin Wadsworth beat me eventually became the Flugelhorn player at 14 and 3 months. And as far as I know, he still holds that record. I don't know, it may have been beaten, I don't know. 59, my first national win, has to be. Because Jeff played so beautiful on that aria. Sam played the flugel solo, absolutely spot on. When we finished the place, he couldn't remember playing it. Dennis, I can't remember playing that. And Jeff playing the euphonium solo. Now the euphoniums, they skyrocket today. They can do 4 octaves comfortable. But in those days, it was unheard of for euphonium players to go above top C. And he actually went to top E flat because it was high pitched then. And he was the only euphonium player to play it on the day. And when we finished, I was only 15. So I was young, I was impressionable. But I looked around the band and all the old men were crying. Now it upsets me now because I couldn't understand what they're crying for. But they came to me afterwards, the others, and said, what a fabulous performance. And in 4 bars rest, top 10 contest performances, unless they've changed it, it's still #1, 50 years after. So, or 50 years after. So I was very, very fortunate to be the youngest member. There are only 7 of us left now, and I'm the youngest. So there's 6, and I'm hoping that I outlive the other 6, so that I can say I'm the last person standing from 1959, which was considered the best win. Now, everybody that plays in the band, they'll always say that their time was the best, possibly, but that's the reason for the band. I first heard the band at a concert in Halifax for one of the Halifax Hospital's concerts. And my old tutor took me, he said, I want you to listen to this, lad. And Willie Lang stood up and played Zelda. And I said, oh, I want to play like that. And what a thrill if I could be in that band. And I was only 10, never thinking that 4 years later, I would be good enough to come here. It was a privilege for 15 years to be in this band and play with such fine players. And you played as a team. Yes, you fell outside of banding because at that time the band was the committee. So after a band practice, the conductor changed his hat. Instead of being the conductor, he was the secretary. I remember going to Swansea, I think it was once. The band didn't want to go, and they said, oh, double the fee. Now at that time, the band charged maybe £150, £200 for a fee, so they charged £400, and it was accepted. So they said, oh, we're not stopping overnight, we'll take 2 drivers. And we actually took 2 drivers and went down and came back the same day. But they would argue about it. I mean, I have letters at home where in 1962, after the Major died, Vaughan Morris wanted the band to play at the 1962 finals as the champion band, and the band actually turned him down and said no. And he couldn't understand why the champion band of England would not play at the championship contest concert in the evening. And we said, no, we don't want it, it's too much. Because in '58, we virtually lost it because we were that tired after playing 6 or 7 concerts and the mass bands from Wednesday to Saturday. And following that, the band decided, which was a good move, to have their own concerts. and different men in the band organised different concerts. David Horsfield and myself organised one at Huddersfield, which is still going at Christmas, the Christmas concert at Huddersfield. It was started not by myself, but I took it over eventually. Tommy Waterman organised one in Nottingham, Morris organised one in Newcastle. We organised concerts and we didn't get paid for them, put the money in the bank, and that paid for us to go to London because the firm didn't pay. If I went off with the band on a week's engagement, I got no pay from the firm. So I only got what the band paid me. In the 30s, 20s, they got a lot more money. They got 2 weeks' wages. And because I have seen Arthur O'Pearce's granddaughter, and he had a diary for every year he was the bandmaster. And those are absolutely exquisite. I hope the band can get hold of them, because in the diaries, each diary, he records every engagement the band took for 5 months. The train times from Bradford to the south coast of England, the manager of the park where they've been playing for a week, the fee the band charged for the week, the fee that the landlady charged for their lodgings, and every item of music that the band played afternoon and evening for 5 months. I borrowed the diaries when I wrote my book, and it took me a month to write each diary, to copy each diary onto computer, and there's 33 diaries, so it took me 33 months, nearly 3 years of hard work. But I did analyse 1925, and if you go through it and analyse it all, they played 187 items of music in 5 months. Now, you cannot rehearse 185 pieces of music. It's impossible. But they played the same 185 pieces of music from 1912, well, he came in 12, I don't know, it might have been 1920. But they played the same pieces of music from 1920 to 1940 for 20 years. So they obviously knew the pieces of music. But it's a fascinating set of diaries. And I do know the band has a photograph, which I've got, of Sir Edward Elgar. And I thought the photograph was taken in the 1930s because he wrote the 7th Suite that year for brass bands. But when I got the diaries, it was the 21st of March 1921. And it says, Concert, Victoria Hall, Sir Edward Elgar. And he never wrote the piece that Elgar wrote for the band for them to listen to. I've asked around, and the consensus is that it was an arrangement of his first symphony for brass band. And Sir Edward was a trombone player, so he knew what he was listening to. But he was sat next to Colonel Herbert Foster, who was the managing director of the mill at that time. So it's some fascinating stories going back. In the 60s, we went to Bellevue, and we were just stepping onto the coach after the contest, and this old man came up to me, said, "What will somebody give me for this little booklet?" And one of the lads said, "Oh, I'll give you £1." And I said, "No," I said, "I'll give you 30 bob." They said, "Oh, it ain't worth 30 shillings. I said, "It is to me." And the booklet was produced by Crabtree's printers in Queensbury in 1902, and it records all the prizes won by the band and the soloists from 1856 to 1902. And I've still got that book to this day. And it was that started me on my quest for Black Dyke, for information about the band. When I was in the mill, I went round a lot of the office blocks and scoured the offices for bits of paper off the band. Some of the people did give me things, and others I lifted. But I didn't actually do when I was secretary, because Foster's up to the 93 kept every transaction that he did in the mill in the office cellars from 1827, and also all the band memorabilia was kept in the office cellars. And in 93, when the firm collapsed, somebody went down and threw the whole lot down the tip. The whole history of Foster's and the band went down the tip. But I was very fortunate, because I started asking round, and I knew Jack Emmett had emigrated to New Zealand. So I asked I emailed the New Zealand band people where he lived, and they said this was his last known address. So I wrote to that address, and this would be 2001, 2002. Unfortunately, he died in '98, I think it was. But his niece said, "What do you want?" I said, "Have you any memorabilia of Black Dyke that you don't want of your uncle's?" She said, "Yes, I have, but how do we get it to you?" I said, "Well, let's think about it." And she said, "Oh, the other thing, I've got his ashes here because he wants them burying at the band room. How do we get them back?" I said, "Leave it with me, we'll have a look." And I read in the Bandsman that Dick Evans was going to be the adjudicator for the national contest in New Zealand. So I rang him up, said, "Dick, you're going to New Zealand?" He said, "Yes." "Will you do me a favour? Will you bring some Dyke memorabilia back and Jack's ashes, please? And I will collect them off you when you come back." "Yes, with pleasure." So I wrote or emailed the young lady in New Zealand. She lived at Dunedin on the South Island. She said, "We will travel to Wellington or up north, Auckland, wherever the contest was at that year, and we will give them to Dick Evans." And he brought me 3 carrier bags full of memorabilia about this band that Jack had kept all those years ago. And that's where I have the bulk of the 60s and Jack's time with the band memorabilia. I've quite a lot of it, plus 2 memorable scores that were presented to the band for the 59 and 61 wins. And I was very, very fortunate that Richard brought them back, and then we ended up we couldn't put them here because of the building extensions that we're thinking of going on. So I had a little bit of a job, but I found his brother's grave in Queensbury churchyard, and I found some relatives, and eventually, after a lot of searching, because the lady who was in charge of the grave, I went to the Bradford crematorium and asked if they would tell me who was in charge of the grave. They gave me the lady's name, but when I asked for her address, they said, "Oh, we can't allow that." But I was in charge with the society, the Queensbury Historical Society. So I found the lady's secretary's name, rang her. She said, "Oh, it's the lady next door to me." So I went and asked her permission, and she gave permission to bury her ashes. And we've had an octet, and they have some pictures of that with Morris and Jeff playing, etc. And we played for the burial of the ashes, and they were consecrated into his brother's grave in the churchyard. So I feel as though I've done a little bit towards the history of the band. Possibly started with John Foster, born in the Thornton area of Bradford in 1798. As a young boy, it said he played the French horn in the Peter Wharton Brass and Reed Band across the valley. That went out of existence, I understand, in the mid-1820s, but in 1833 the Queen's Head Village Band was formed as a wind band. That fell on hard times in the 1840s, so they changed it to an all-brass combination and had quite a considerable success. But in 1855, it was falling on hard times again, and Foster's decided that they would take the band into the factory. They would provide every man with a job, new uniforms, new instruments, and a new professional conductor, Samuel Longbottom, from Mixenden in Halifax, and they would call it the Black Dyke Mills Band. On September 5th, 1855, the firm purchased a brand new set of instruments from Joseph Hyam of Manchester, and they were delivered on the September 5th, 1855. From that time on, Foster's have sponsored the band completely. I understand from 1837 they may have had a little bit of input in helping the band, but officially the firm took over in 1855. And of course it's provided professional conductors, and it's paid mainly the soloists retaining fees, but principally just the principal cornet until the 60s, and then that was expanded to the euphonium, the trombone, the flugel, the solo horn, soprano and the bass trombone. Main challenges was the band was a good band in the 60s. It fell obviously when Major Wilcox died, and Morris moved on, Jack Emmett left, and for 12 months more we were a bit rudderless till Jeff took over, and then Major Yeager came from the Irish Guards, and he, unfortunately, he won the areas but never won the British Open or the National. They were very, very disappointed because it followed Major Wilcox at the Irish Guards, and he desperately wanted to emulate Major Wilcox. Although equally as good a musician, because he became the director of Brigade of Guards and Kneller Hall, but unfortunately he died at the age of 57. Very, very able conductor at the time. Geoffrey came and he lifted the band tremendously. And then in 1970 Roy left, which is a bit traumatic, and then we'd Dennis Carr for 3 months, but unfortunately Dennis couldn't stand the pace of being the conductor and the secretary, and the firm insisted that whoever conducted the band as bandmaster or resident conductor did the secretarial work as well, and unfortunately he couldn't cope with it. And then we got Wilfred Heaton for 6 months, a marvellous, marvellous musician. I believe the band was the first band to play his contest music, which is regarded as the finest contest piece ever written, but it was years before its time, in 1970. My most fateful time with the band was when I came back as secretary in 1990. And unfortunately, David King was asked to leave the band by David Allen, and upon his resignation, 6 of the players walked out. Jim Watson came at the next rehearsal. You cut the air with a knife, the atmosphere, and after the rehearsal, 6 more said, well, we're not stopping, we don't like him. And then Jim released 2 of the players, and 4 more said, well, if you're letting them go, we're going. And at the end of a week or a fortnight, we were left with 6 players from the original band. We had a job at Dudley, which we had to cancel. We said the band had got full of cold and couldn't do it, and they would do it later, which they did. And then Jim Watson had to then start and rebuild the band. He brought Bob Childs in on euphonium and Kevin on soprano. And the rest is history. After 18 months, he won the British Open. But that time, for me, I thought at the time, honestly thought the band has had it. There won't be a Black Dyke band. But there was. He saved the day. I think one of the best trips was to Canada in 1972, when we played at Niagara Falls. And we went over the border to Buffalo. We got there, a little bit of a joke this, but the Kleinwert Hall, and it held about 4,000 people, and there's only 1,000 people in. So we said to the organisers, why only 1,000 people? Wherever we go, we have a full house. And the organiser, well, you will call yourselves Black Dyke. We said, well, that's his name. Well, you should change it. No, we said, we don't change it for anything. Why should we change it? Well, Black Dykes in America are known as Black Lesbians. They thought it was a lesbian band. I understand they went later on. Yes, it's true. It's perfectly true, is that. That is the truth. And in the 95, I think in the mid-90s, Jim Watson took them to Carnegie Hall, and they were advertising Black Dyke Mills Band from Queensbury. They thought they were Queens. The difference in the language between the American and the English. So yes, there has been some fun within the band at times. Well, hopefully the band will continue because of its reputation over the last 150 years or so, since 1855. It's been at the top echelons of banding for the whole of that time. It's never been out of the top 10, and it's very rarely out of the top 2, even when it's had very little success. It's a name that, in brass band terms, is a name to conjure with, and every player, I would think, that's a brass player, would aspire to become a member of this band. The snack today for youngsters is that there's too much other things to occupy the mind. They don't concentrate on one thing and become really good at it. The youngsters that I've seen around, they have cricket, they've swimming, they've other hobbies, and they don't concentrate on just simply brass playing. So what will happen in the future, I think Black Dyke will continue, because it will always have the pick of the best throughout, because it's always had the pick of the best, purely due to its contest reputation. I mean, it's second to none. No other band has come anywhere near the amount of prizes that this band has won in 150 years. It really is. I mean, Corey's, okay, they said they're winning now, and they're at the top of the tree. They're beating Black Dyke in all the rankings. But can they sustain it for the next 40 or 50 years? I don't think they will. Eventually, they all drop. These bands come, Fairies come, Fodens come, Brighouse. They're really keen rivals with Brighouse. Really friendly rivalry. They all come up, they beat the band for a year or two, but then they drop back. But Black Dyke stops there all the time. It's still there, even to this day, and I hope it will continue that way. My only snack about it is today there's a lot of money involved, as we were talking about. The younger people, I don't know what they get paid now. I have no idea, but it's money has become a lot of involved in it. In times they move on. Why do they move on? You've only got to look. When I joined the band in '58, there must have been 8 to 10 players that had been there 30 to 40 years. Owen Bottomley, who taught me, had been there since 1925, 26. The bass players, Ernest had done 40 years when I joined, and he did another 10 after that. The only player to do 50 years. In Black Dyke, there's only Philip on E-flat bass that's done 30 years now, one player. The rest of them, Richard's done maybe 10 or 15 years now, 10 years or so. But the bulk of them are moving on. They're like students, they come and they go. Yes, the band will retain its top that level because they can attract the players. But for me, there isn't the commitment to the band that there used to be. And it's not just Black Dyke, it's every band. In banding in general, there isn't the commitment from the young people. So yes, Black Dyke will get the best, and so it should continue for my lifetime and beyond, I hope. But there isn't that commitment to stay for a long period of time and settle down. They want instant success, some of the youngsters, and if they don't get it, they move on, and that's sad. My advice is, if you like making music, whatever type of music you enjoy, go for it, because music will enhance your education. It gives you a discipline. It gave me a discipline in my life, and I can see it giving discipline to other youngsters. And if they're any good at it, then practice, and reach for the stars, because you are capable of doing it, even if it's not brass bands. Some of the players that have passed through my hands this last 40 years have gone on and making names for themselves in the orchestral world, and I say good luck to them. It's not just brass banding, it's all music. We need to get children involved in all types of music, and if we can catch them for brass bands, the more the merrier. But it's difficult because they have so many other things. They've got the Xboxes and the television scene and their apps to play with, and they don't have the time to practice. And I'm sorry, but there's the Olympics on at the moment, it's the same with them. They have to practice. The lad that's won the breaststroke gold, really terrific of him. He frightened the water, but he's practiced, and and his parents have sacrificed for him, and I think it's marvellous. But they've got to be concentrating on one thing. they want to be jack of all trades and master of none. So my advice to youngsters is, if you want to be a musician, by all means be one, because it will enhance your life. It will enrich your life, because you meet, wherever you go, I've gone all over the world and not been able to speak a language, but I can play music and I am understood. By playing my instrument, the people I'm talking to can understand me and know where I'm coming from. And it's marvellous. Even if you can't speak their language and they can't speak yours, you can communicate with music. And that, for me, is what music's all about.